All right, thank you so much, Lulu and Jeff. And to start us off, even as we reflect on what we just watched in Kitui, let's see what the Presidential Working Party on Education Reforms is saying. They are recommending that the 2-6-3-3-3 structure be adopted. 2 years pre-primary, 6 years in primary, 3 years at the junior school, 3 years at the senior school, and 3 years at the university, which is a minimum number of years. Beyond that, they are saying that the subjects that are being offered in these institutions need to be reduced. For instance, the pre-primary level, which is PP1 and PP2, the subjects should be 5. For those that are in lower primary, that is grade 1 up to 3, a maximum of 7 subjects. For those that are in upper primary, that is grade 4 to 6, maximum of 8 subjects. For those that are in junior school, that is the current junior secondary school, grade 7 to 9, the number of subjects is being reduced from 14 to 9 subjects. Then for the senior school, this is what you currently may call senior secondary school, then that is grade 10 up to 12, there should be 7 subjects being offered. For the university level, then they are talking about the minimum of 3 years per program. Then there's also a proposal to change the structure of the schools, to change from primary schools to comprehensive schools, which will house the PP1, which is in early childhood education, up to grade 9, which is the end of junior school. That is what that says. And of course, there will be all this contained in that institution. So that is sort of changing the structure of the institutions as we know them. We'll later talk about the assessment that is being proposed on how to assess, not to examine, especially these learners from different levels of education. But Professor Odote, you sat in that Presidential Working Party and you came up with this report. First of all, tell us, why are you suggesting to reduce the workload? And therefore, what subjects are you looking at exactly? Because, for instance, the junior secondary schools, or what will become junior school, out of 14, down to 9, how do you reduce that? Which ones? What is essential?
Thank you, Sam, for that question. When we went around, one of the things that everybody complained about was that there was overlaps, there was overloads, that kids were not being kids. That we were running from an 8-4-4 system to try and have a system that was enabling kids to be able to learn and learn in a good environment. We ended up having too many subjects. People ask, why must they do all these subjects? Can't we do something about them? Is there something that can be able to be done to make learning much more effective? So having listened to everybody, we came to the suggestion that let us reduce the numbers. But you will see, we did not say get rid of subject X, because we've left that to the curriculum experts, and we had conversations with the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development and agreed on to the numbers. So the actual subjects, they'll actually have to go and discuss and say which ones can we get rid of. Because even as we're doing so, you need to ensure that in terms of curriculum coverage, the scope is one that is still internationally matching. So that's why we made the suggestion to reduce the number of subjects. But one of the places where we spoke about reducing is if you had parents were complaining, we're being asked to do a lot of work at home. That you're asking people to do community service learning, but you're telling us, go to the market, go and do this. So that's one of the areas where we said community service learning is important, but the amount and extent of community service learning, the kind of assignments that people are being given can be reduced so that you still get the objective without burdening the parents, without burdening the children. So that was the rationale for the reduction of subjects.
Daktari Kilemi, ukiangalia jinsi hali ilivyo katika ile shule ya Kitui, ambayo ni hali katika baadhi ya maeneo ambayo yanaonekana kutengwa, na uangalia yale mapendekezo ambayo yanazidi kutolewa kila baada ya muda fulani. Kulikuwa na ule wakati ambapo kulikuwa na pendekezo la vipakatalishi ama laptops katika shule. Ilhali tuna shule kama zile za Kitui ambazo ziko katika hali ambayo haya mambo hata tukisema tunapunguza idadi ya masomo ni kama tuko katika dunia tofauti na wengine. Je, haya mapendekezo ya elimu yanayotolewa huwa kweli yanatilia maanani wananchi ambao hawaelewi haya mabadiliko, manake mahitaji yao ni tofauti?
Asante sana. First, let me say this. You should ask the question, what is in a system? We are 743 system. We came to 844. Now we are in CBC. What counts about education is not the number of years or the subjects you have got in it, but how well you prepare the system to be able to produce kids that can, have benefited from the system. Secondly, the problems we are seeing in Kitui were there during my time. They were there during 844. They were always there. So they have not changed just because of CBC. The question, therefore, is about how we support the schools that are in that kind of situation. And that calls for equitable funding. A school in Kitui will need to be funded more than Alliance High School. But apparently, unfortunately, it is the national schools that get the bulk of the money. This is completely unfair. We must look at those schools and spend most of the money there. Finally, you know, the idea of 844 was that education would create employment. So we started a lot of vocational subjects and so on. And there are people who are also thinking now that CBC will lead to employment. This is a fallacy. Training does not create jobs. It does not create jobs. Jobs are created by the economy, by the wider context and out of school. So we need to deal with that situation, because even if you go through CBC and the economy is not creating jobs, it will not help. If you go through CBC, through university, and you can't get a job because you can't bribe, the system will not have helped you. So I think we should look at this at the wider context. But for me, we have CBC. How best can we work on it such that it gives us products that can compete locally, regionally, and globally, but more importantly, aware that a lot of the changes that we require to make use of those kids have to emanate from the wider system in which education is operating.
Na bila shaka Sam, kuna hili swali la funding ambalo Daktari Kilemi amelitaja. Janet, labda unaweza kutueleza tuweze kuelewa ni kipi kigumu katika kuhakikisha ile shule ambayo inahitaji zaidi inapata mgao mkubwa kuliko ile shule ambayo imekuwepo kwa muda mrefu na imeendelea kimiundo msingi?
Thank you very much. And I think the very first thing that we have to say from the onset is that the problem facing the education sector in Kenya is nothing else. It is a problem of funding. I'm actually very disappointed reading this entire report, because it looks like so many other reports that we have always read, and it confirms to us that it is not about changing a name from this to the other. It's not about introducing synonyms. It's not about politicizing processes. It's about political commitment to fund education. And 8 months, down the line, and this is a new year since the other government came in, I'm looking at the commitment. We are sitting here and we are saying that we have embraced CBC, despite us going around the country and demonizing the same thing that we said. I actually thought that this particular presidential working party was going to have 10 recommendations about how to finance education. But look at us. Even primary education, as we speak, for the first term and the second term, they can confirm, the teachers can confirm. They did not even receive the capitation grant. One child is supposed to receive ordinary 1,200 shillings. This government has not been able to remit that amount of money. We were in this country when we saw schools, secondary schools, closing early. Why? Because government has not remitted the funds that they are supposed to remit. But a president stands up and says, I have given 100 million to Alliance. He stands up and says, for every shilling that the county government of Nairobi is going to spend on school funding, I am going to give another shilling. Where is all this money that we are seeing in people's mouths? And why aren't we putting money where it is supposed to be? This capitation model was agreed a long time ago. It is tested and fully tested. Why can't government concentrate on giving money to public, primary schools and to public secondary schools? Let me tell you, people went around this country demonizing CBC. We are now here saying we are adopting and we are doing what, and we are not putting money on the table. We will still meet here and complain and now look for another source of the problem. The other source of the problem was the previous government. Now we are sitting here. Why are we not funding schools as we are supposed to fund schools? We can call them names, we can move from senior school to, we can baptize whatever we want. But as long as you're not going to be putting more money in public education, it is just going to be a waste.
No,
okay. All right. Let's reflect a little bit before we can get back to the costing of this education, because there are proposals on how CBC will be assessed in school. For instance, grade 6, which is the transition to junior school, there will be a cumulative score of what a student has been getting from the school-based assessments from grade 4 to grade 6. And the essence of this assessment will be to monitor learners' progress and give feedback to the various stakeholders that are involved in that sector. Then for those that will be in grade 9, that is junior school, you're transitioning now to the senior school, 20% will come from the Kenya Primary School education assessment. This is an assessment that was actually administered last year for grade 6 learners. 20% will come from the school-based assessment, which is for grade 7 and 8, and then 60% to be a summative evaluation. We'll be getting to understand what this summative evaluation is, and of course this is supposed to be guided by the Kenya National Examinations Council. Then for grade 12, which is the senior secondary, you're now transitioning to the university level, 70% to be summative assessment. 30% to be school-based assessment, meaning inclusive of an assessment of the community service learning and an assessment of the values and competencies that you'll have acquired while in the line of schooling. Dr. Mugo, when you look at this, knowing that you've done a lot of research in as far as how competent learners are, and especially those studies that you used to do and said that a grade 7 or standard 7 learner cannot answer some standard 2 question, this changing how we're assessing the learners, how will it exactly work, and what must we do to ensure that it works so that you're not just appreciating the competencies in about responding to academic questions, but also everything else that CBC is supposed to be achieving?
Yeah, thanks. Actually, assessment is going to be a key driver of the success of CBC. And from this frame of examination, of scores, of getting an A and all that, we have to shift from that to what is the student able to do. When you give them something to read, you know what is their level. And so that is going to necessitate a new generation of teachers. And the first thing to do is to ensure that those teachers who are under training now in pre-service are being trained in a new way of assessing, not examining, because we have shifted now from examining to assessing. And those teachers that are in classroom today are equipped well and through ongoing support in the classroom on how to make this very critical shift from examining to assessing. But the other one has been the question of trust. And you wonder why primary school teachers cannot be trusted to give scores to their pupils. Secondary school teachers cannot be trusted. But when you go to TVET, you go to university, you find that where a professor here teaches, he assesses his students and submits marks. So I think this shift also the public face has to move. But if this is not supported by values, I think teachers have to agree that we have the responsibility of being trusted, of demonstrating the values that we want to see in society. Because if you're a teacher and you are guiding your pupils and students to steal an examination, then you are not supposed to be a teacher in the first place. So support by values is also critical, but the most critical is assessment capacities, because assessing things we see in CBC like problem solving, like values like respect or responsibility, is not the same as examining biology or chemistry. It's a total shift. And these things are not a black and white, a right and wrong. It is actually a journey that the student has been on, and you have to place them somewhere. So we have not seen these capacities being developed adequately in the system, and it's a big concern. But there are other things also we have had, like community service learning, parental engagement and empowerment. How are we going also to assess these other things, principles, so that we know that the system is moving in the direction? So it is not just assessing the students, right. It is also assessing the system and us holding the system to account.
Na bila shaka, Daktari Manyasa, kuna hili swala lingine ambalo limependekezwa kuhusiana na jinsi ambavyo shule zinaweka kwenye viwango. Tumezoea kwamba kuna zile shule za kitaifa, kuna zile za extra county na mambo kama hayo, lakini sasa zinapaswa kulingana na mapendekezo haya kuwekwa katika labda tuseme zile taaluma za kisayansi au za mambo mengine. Je, hili swala litawezekana ukiangazia hususan masuala ya miundo msingi na hata walimu ambao wanahitajika katika shule hizi ambazo zitakuwa zinawekwa kwenye viwango namna hii?
Asante Mashirima, and since I believe maybe this is the last time I'm commenting, allow me to make comments beyond the question that you asked, but I'll answer your question as well. The first thing I want to speak to is the notion that has been sold during this show that the new capitation model will actually solve the problems universities are facing. The problems universities are facing stem from, one, government failure to send capitation on time, and two, from mismanagement by the VCs who are there. I taught in the university and I saw mismanagement from a close range. They acquired campuses, most of which made losses. They have closed them down. They lost money that they should not have lost. The third thing that causes all this is, and this is the problem around the notion that this model will solve the problem, is that if government fails to remit the money is committing to give us scholarships for those who need, the universities will still not have money. So that will still be a problem. So I think that we need to put that to rest. The reason some of us campaigned for a differentiated model was for equity, not for solving university management problems, because that won't be solved by the change of the model. The second thing that I want to mention is what I've seen in the report that is not very good, in the sense that there are recommendations which seem to contradict each other along the way. One of the things that I can speak to here is the recommendation to remove the National Education Board. So we want to remove the National Education Board and leave the county education boards, which, if you look at their functions, they are supposed to work in consultation and cooperation with the National Education Board. I don't understand that. The second thing is the suggestion that the county commissioners should chair the county education boards. And if you look at the functions that the county education board is supposed to deal with, one of them is to oversee ECD and vocational training, which are devolved functions. If you give a county commissioner, are you nationalizing those functions? If you give the county commissioner to chair the county education board, I think that is a problem. Finally, I think, if you look at the problem we've seen in the news feature, and you imagine that some of those schools are hosting junior secondary right now, because we decided that we'll keep junior secondary in primary. So some of those schools are hosting junior secondary. What are they preparing those young people for? Are they capable of preparing anyone for senior school? I have seen the recommendation that will make sub-county schools to be senior schools. I have photos of some of the sub-county schools that look exactly like what we've seen here. Are they capable, even if someone gave us 100 billion today to invest in them with 2 years, and the way we know government inertia, will we be able to transform those sub-county schools in 2 years to make them worthy of senior school? So very, very pertinently, I think, it is important that we put our minds together and start to agree that we shall no longer use education as this private good that we fight for, and we use to create advantages and disadvantages among our children.
Yet it is supposed to be a public good. I think, Professor Dotto, you owe your right of reply because you sat in the Presidential Working Party. But first of all, those questions about the funding, the infrastructure that we are seeing, but also proposal that 60% of the institutions, currently secondary schools, should be STEM. How do you do that at a time that majority of teachers are actually not in the science areas? You don't have sufficient infrastructure in terms of what a science school needs. How do we get there?
Thanks. You know, it's very easy to speak about the problems, and Dr. Manyasa has done a very good job speaking about the problems. Our responsibility was to provide solutions, and I will try and respond in terms of providing solutions. Let's start with the concerns about the dilapidated nature of schools. That is not a preserve of the primary schools. It is a preserve of almost all our schools across the country. If you go to primary schools, you'll see the same problem. If you go to what you are calling sub-county schools, secondary schools currently, they are the same kind of problem. Yet, those schools have been delivering people. I think as we make the suggestions that we made, we need to look at the two sides of the equation that we are trying to deal with. For resource allocation, what have we proposed? We have, for example, made the proposals about minimum essential package to ensure that every school has a minimum levels of infrastructure support. Secondly, we've spoken about the need to ensure that schools have technology. We've spoken about the need for there to be able to ensure that we build additional classrooms and laboratories for all the schools. The idea about dealing with equity that Dr. Manyasa speaks about for the universities, but not for the primary level, is that if we want to make education affordable, then the schools that are near my home must be as good as the schools that are far from me. That's the only way we'll ensure that Collins Odote does not have to go to Starehe for him to succeed. Because if he only must go to Starehe and Alliance, then we'll continue making education the preserve of the rich. It is the reason why, even in terms of funding, we have said much more resources. We need to reverse what's been the current practice. The current practice is the bulk of the resources have gone to national schools. We are making the point that the bulk of the resources must be reversed. They must go to sub-county schools because 70% of kids actually learn in those sub-county schools. That's the first thing. The second thing, in terms of how will teachers be able to deliver on this? That's why retooling is important, so that everybody is taught to learn the new things. Lastly, about assessment that you spoke about. I think the one thing that we've done, and thank you, Dr. Mugo, the one thing that we've done about assessment, you know, the fact that now assessment as grade 6 is not for placement. You saw kids finish grade 6, and the hula baloo that comes after those exams, I am looking for a school, what will happen, was essentially away. But there's a second thing that we haven't spoken about, that those assessments are not lost.
Okay.
That the assessment that you have in grade 6 will eventually impact on what happens in grade 9. They'll eventually impact on what happens in grade 12. Because at the end of the day, we want to move to a system where when I was in school, I did very well in Kiswahili.
Right.
After that, I went to a school and I was looking for a teaching job. They offered me to teach Kiswahili. I told them, although I passed Kiswahili, I cannot teach Kiswahili.
You can teach Kiswahili.
I think we need to reach a stage where people are looking for their competences, not the academic grades that you got. And that's what the change of assessment is trying to do.
So the summative assessment is written exam?
The summative assessment at the end, yes, it is.
Okay, all right. We want to transition. Dr. Kilemi, allow me to transition first to Kibra because they're waiting to tell us about what their concerns are. And Hassan Mugambi is there with Waweru Wanyambura. Let's listen to them. Hassan, if you can hear me, just take it away.
Thank you very much. Sam, tuko hapa katika eneo la Kibra kama ulivyosema, ni kwamba ni mengi ambayo yamesemwa katika studio na wazazi na walimu wamekuwa wakisikia, ikiwa ni wao ndio wanafanya utekelezwaji wa mfumo huu wa CBC. Hebu tusikie tu wanasemaje. Kwanza kabisa utaniruhusu kabla ya kuzungumza na walimu ambao wako hapa, tupate tu usemi wa wazazi kuambatana na swala zima la CBC. Watoto wamekuja nyumbani wanao kazi mbalimbali ambazo zinahitaji wale wazazi pia nao waweke shughuli zao chini, waketi na kuwasaidia wanafunzi wao. Hebu tusikie wanasemaje. Waweru.
Asante sana Hassan. Moja kwa moja tunajiunga na dadangu, ameniambia yuko na wanafunzi wawili ambao wote wao katika huu mfumo mpya wa CBC. Karibu sana katika mada hii ya leo. Niambie vile ambavyo umekuwa ukichukulia huu mfumo mpya wa elimu wa CBC.
Okay, asante sana kwa majina, naitwa Faith. Mimi ni mzazi wa watoto wawili, niko na CBC grade 3 na grade 4. So mimi kama mama, sasa umetoka kazi uko na stress, mimi huendesha pikipiki. Nimetoka huko na stress za jam. Niko na stress zangu kukosana na makastoma hivi, mtoto naye anakukujia, mwalimu alisema niende na kuku, mwalimu alisema niende na mayai na mrenda. Sasa unajiuliza, mimi nimekuja hiyo jioni, saa hiyo nataka maybe nipike cabbage ndio itaiva haraka juu pia watoto wangu wameningoja na ingianga kwa nyumba saa 2 asa single mother. Sasa nitatoka tena hiyo usiku niende kutafuta mrenda na mwalimu anataka ile mrenda umepika. Unataka kiitisha mrenda yenye itapigwa, unazanunua hata ya 5 mama ya 10. Unasikia uchungu, uko na stress asa single mother. Walimu wa CBC wamenonea kwa pesa yetu. Mimi natafuta school fees, tena nitafutie mwalimu chakula. Huyu mtoto ameenda na mayai imepasukia kwa barabara. Mwalimu haezi elewa, anamrudisha nyumbani na mimi saa hiyo niko kazi, sijui kama mtoto amerudi nyumbani, maybe nilikuwa nimeacha hapo pesa ya jioni ya sapa. Mtoto amechukua hiyo pesa ameenda kununua mayai, budget yangu imeharibika. Mwalimu anaambia mtoto apike kitanda, enda uambie mamako upike kitanda, picha unitumie WhatsApp. Huyu mwalimu na ni mwanaume, akona nia gani mimi nipike? Na saa hiyo sina kitanda, maybe nalala chini. Kama mzazi unasikia aje? Kitanda inahusikana aje na masomo? Huyo mwalimu anataka kujua kama nalala chini ama kwa kitanda. Nasikia uchungu kama mzazi sana. Na huyu ni mtoto wa grade 3, ati apike picha. Na kama sina simu ya WhatsApp, mnataka nifanye aje kama mzazi?
Asante sana. Labda tu pia kwa kifupi, tulikuwa tumezungumza nawe, lakini ulikuwa umeniambia watoto wako, wanafunzi wako ni wa CBC. Sasa ni uzito upi ambao umekuwa ukipatana nao katika kufanikisha mfumo mzima wa CBC kwako nyumbani?
Mazito ambayo ninapata vile huyu mwenzangu amesema, mtoto akienda shule hauna pesa, saa zingine mtoto anarudishwa nyumbani na kichapo. Mwalimu amesema anataka sukuma sijui ngapi, mara mwalimu amesema anataka nyama, mara mwalimu anataka unga ngano, uende na unga ngano ya chapati na mafuta na hii chuma ya kupikia, na hauna, utafanya aje? Watoto wanapitia makubwa shuleni, sisi wazazi pia tunapitia kwa CBC.
Ma'am, baada ya grade ya 6, kuna uwezo wa mwanafunzi wako kutafuta ama kuchagua yale masomo ambayo ataendelea na katika junior secondary. Wewe umewezeshwa na yale ambayo yanahitajika ili umsaidie mtoto wako kuchagua yale masomo ambayo yatamsaidia. Una ufahamu wa yale masomo anafaa kuchagua?
Ndio, niko nayo, lakini changamoto sasa atachagua na saa zingine sitakuja kujiweza kwa hiyo enye amechagua hiyo subjects. Sasa mtoto atarudi kubaki kwa nyumba saa zingine.
Asante. Hassan, walimu wanasemaje kuhusu mfumo huu wa CBC?
Na bila shaka tumepata kusikia tu baadhi ya changamoto ambao wanapitia wale wazazi ambao watoto wao wanapelekwa nyumbani ima kwa njia moja au nyingine. Kuna kitu ambacho kinahitajika na labda wewe mwenyewe hauna ule uwezo. Sasa nizungumze tu na wale walimu ambao wako hapa, ambao pia ni walimu wakuu katika shule mbalimbali na vile vile kabisa washikadau katika sekta hii ya elimu ambao tuko nao hapa hii leo. Kwanza nikianza tu na wewe kama mwalimu mkuu, je, changamoto wanazozungumzia wale wazazi mmeweza mkuwa ni wenye kukumbana nazo ima kwa njia moja au nyingine? Unataka kitu kifike shuleni na labda mzazi hana ule uwezo.
Okay, challenges are there, but the thing is each and every school has got its own tradition, has got its own arrangement. Of course, practicals is a must, because for us to test on all the core competencies, there are practicals that must be done because children are expected to be hands-on. And given that from grade 4, the assessments are done nationally, and marks are normally recorded by NEC. So in the event that a child fails to carry out an exercise, then that child's name will go blank. What we normally do as a school, we call our parents and sensitize them on the importance of these assessments so that they own the assessments. And also we try to talk to our teachers to try to use improvisation, low-cost, no-cost materials. I don't think if it is really practical that a child may be told to take meat to a school. Because what is normally done, once parents have been sensitized on the importance of these exercises, then they are asked to donate something small as a group, instead of putting a whole burden to a particular parent to take a hen or a chicken or a kilo of meat. No. What I know is that CBC is challenging. For instance, in my school, all my classes, the enrollment, every class has got 100+ children. I told you I've got 5,546 children. And if you are a teacher and you are to conduct a practical to 100 children, and a particular group of parents feel that they don't want to be part of this practical, at the end of the day, when the cumulative or the summative assessment is being done by NEC, these children will miss out. And also, schools, we know the kind of parents we are dealing with. Some parents are really down to earth financially. We always employ or put on the human face and assist such kind of children once we know the level of their vulnerability. But what I know is that CBC is challenging and parents must be involved. Thank you.
And if you're talking about parents being involved, are the teachers also well trained for the kind of exercise that is ahead of them?
Most of our teachers, more so those handling CBC classes, in fact, almost all have undergone training. It's only that, you know, something like training must be something that is ongoing. You cannot be trained today and be expected to master all the competencies. So the trainings are on, and they are also learning on the job as they do the teaching.
Learning on the job. Does your school have the prerequisite infrastructure to support the CBC?
Thank you, San Mogambi. Benson Adika here. Indeed, the issue of CBC, as my colleague has said, it is a challenge. But in my school, I would say we are at 60%. That's Kikosha Primary School. But as you heard, actually, no particular school was really prepared for this particular baby called CBC, but you are trying. Now, partly, maybe to the parents, we realize that because most of the parents were not involved on the onset, that's why we are getting most of the complaints from parents, because ideally, I want to agree with my colleague, head teacher from Olympic. A teacher cannot ask children to bring maybe 20 chicken to school, for sure. It is maybe 1 or 2 for demonstration. But the whole of Alabalu that is going around, actually it has been blown out of proportion because parents were not involved in the right place, actually at the right time. So like, if parents were involved, for instance, maybe the projects that are being talked about, maybe grade 4 in agriculture, they are making maybe scarecrow. And maybe the parents are involved, maybe the school, the teachers they get right information, so they know that maybe our learners are required to make this particular animal, or rather assemble some of the materials. So they make, and the learners are aware and the parents are aware, so that even after the exercise, if the scarecrow is carried back home, it does not scare the father. Actually, if it is put maybe in a corner and the father walks home in the wee hours of the night, because he was not aware in the first place, he gets scared and he makes a lot of noise. So it means that most of the parents were not involved. But in our school, again, it depends with the parents. You know, most of the parents of today, most of them have gone to school.
Yes.
So to speak. Most of the parents of today, we are even talking about the nyanya, the shows of today are not the shows of during our times. That they know how to operate laptop, they know how to operate smartphones. But the challenge is, like, when you are coming from those areas where there are no maybe electricity, parents actually, the first thing they are talking of maybe stomach, so they will not think about maybe incorporating some of these things, actually even internalizing the competence that we're talking about.
Yes.
So it actually starts with the parents, maybe during forums such like meetings, we call them to school, we tell them that CBC here, actually I agree, the CBC is a beautiful baby. But there are certain things that, like right now, we are talking about, we are seeing subjects being reduced right away from pre-primary, then the primary, and then the junior, and so on. But even the secondary schools, that now they are going to abolish maybe the national, the extra county 1, extra county 2, then sub-county. It's a beautiful idea. But the implementation will be a part of the problem.
Naam. Yes. Je, wanajua kile ambacho wanatekeleza?
Ninaye mwalimu mwingine hapa Hassan. Sijui zaidi ya yale walimu pale wameongea, katika upande huo ukumbi, ni jambo lipi ambalo ni changamoto ambalo halijaguziwa?
Asante sana bwana Hassan Mugambi. Ni Boaz Wanjala, Star Rescue Center, Kibra. Naam, changamoto za CBC zipo na ziko nasi. One is that is about what my colleagues and my heads have just talked about. It's expensive, very expensive. Let's talk about some of the strands in this CBC learning areas. You are told, with the help of your parent or guardian, go and take a picture of A, B, C, D. And the child you are telling, in their homes, they do not have that smartphone. The child doesn't know, the child has never seen a smartphone. The parent herself or himself is maybe a guardian, is not a biological parent, is an orphan. For example, where I'm coming from, many of the children are orphans. we do not have the Wi-Fi around them, even if maybe one parent is privileged to own one. Now, how will they take these photos? It will force them to go to the cybers, maybe, isn't it? And it is very expensive.
Very, very expensive. Because of time, naomba nikukatize hapo, manake tayari wanasema tuelekee upande wa pili wa studio na tusikie pia washikadau katika sekta hii ambao wanafaa kuwa wanakuwezesha wewe kama mzazi, wewe kama mwanafunzi kufanya shughuli ya CBC wanasemaje. Rashid Abdallah.
Naam, shukran sana Hassan Mugambi. Hapa nikiwa na mwenzangu Trevor Mbija na washikadau wengi tu sana. Nataka tuchangie moja kwa moja swala la CBC. Nimlete Kaindi Muli manake muda tuweze kutumia vizuri. Ni kwamba Kaindi Muli, kwa hivi sasa tumeona kwamba kuna masomo ambayo yameweza kupunguzwa. Swala ambalo Wakenya wangepata kujua ni kwamba masomo haya yamepunguzwa kwa sababu ya kuboresha elimu ama yamepunguzwa kwa sababu ni mzigo kwa wanafunzi na wazazi?
Asante sana. Kwanza kabisa nimemsikiza daktari ambaye amekuwa akisema akijustify vile waliangalia kuangazia mpaka akaweza kupunguzwa. Lakini kwangu mimi naonelea tumekimbia kidogo. Kwa sababu tukiangalia pale junior secondary, ile ni transition stage ambayo ni preparatory stage ya wale watoto kuweza kuangazia zaidi, waweze kuona talent zao ili waweze kuchukua ni pathway zipi katika zile senior secondary schools. Sasa ikiwa tutaanza kurudisha yale masomo chini, we are narrowing their choices. Na ukikumbuka wakati 844 tulipoanza, vile tulikuwa na masomo mapana. Tukaanza kusema kuwa ni mengi, tupunguze. Tukaendelea kupunguza, tukapunguza mpaka tukatoa kila kitu na tukaanza kuwa na mambo ya mitihani zaidi. Ni hapo tutaelekea ikiwa sasa hatutaweza kuangalia tena. Mimi kwangu kupunguza masomo hasa pale katika junior school, hiyo tungetulia kidogo, na pia pale senior school. Kwa vile tukipunguza ile 9th subject ndio itakuwa ile optional. Na pale optional ndio kuna zile talent learning mingi. Sasa hizo talent learning ambazo tutapunguza iwe moja, tutakuwa sasa tuna shepherd hawa watoto katika sehemu moja tu. Hapo ningeona tungetulia kidogo. Tukija kwa upande wa kwanza ni vizuri kuwa kuna assessment for learning, you know. Sasa mimi najiuliza ile assessment itafanya katika grade 9. Alafu tunarudi katika KEPSEA kuchukua 20% kule. Assessment ambayo ilifanywa nikiwa kijana wa miaka 11. Sasa matokeo yale yanataka yatumiwe wakati niko na miaka 15. Hapo kwangu naonelea tungefikiria tena. Ile assessment ya pale KEPSEA inaweza kuwa assessment for learning. Tujue hawa vijana, hawa watoto wamejifunza nini, ni vipi tunaweza kuwa endeleza. Ile ripoti iweze kupewa walimu katika junior school, waitumie kuweza kuangazia zaidi.
Okay. We'll come back to that in just a bit. Let me bring in Moreno Carl. Moreno Carl is a parent, a CBC parent, and we're talking about reducing the number of subjects. Do you agree with that proposal, and what has your experience been like?
Just as Mr. Ndimuli has said, we are parents and we rely on teachers to make us aware of what is happening. And then you realize that when all this is done, we are feeling that our children are losing out, because some of these subjects that are reduced, you realize that they are going to be of very serious help to our children in the coming years. As it has also been said, that that is what will determine if a child is supposed to perform what.
There are parents who claim that the burden right now is too heavy for the children. You don't think so, being a CBC parent?
I am a parent, remember, and there are experts that are supposed to say that. that are supposed to support us on that.
Okay.
So as a parent, what I know is that these subjects, like let's say a child would want to be a doctor. You have seen that even in a child, given the strength of the child in the subjects that he's taking. And then you are told that these subjects have been scrapped.
Okay.
So you are left disturbed.
Okay.
Because it does not give the child the opportunity to realize his dream when he's of age. Yes.
Na mtakatiza kulete kwa sababu kuna walimu pia wale ambao washawahi kufundisha CBC hapa tutaweza kupata mwalimu kwa sababu tumpe mwalimu mmoja hapa mpe kipaza sauti kwa sababu inaonekana kama walimu wanasema walikuwa wana mzigo mzito. Wanafunzi ni wengi na masomo ni mengi. Je, unadhani kupunguzwa wewe kama mwalimu kunaleta nafuu kwenu kuweza kutoa mafunzo bora darasani?
Asante sana Rashid. Kwanza kabisa nitasema ya kwamba kule kupunguzwa si jinsi ambavyo mwalimu Kahi alivyosema sio suluhu. Kwa sababu utapata ya kwamba hapo awali kulikuwa na education for self reliance wakati wa Rais Moi na kulikuwa na hayo masomo mpaka hata art and craft na hayo yote ambayo yalikuwa yametenganishwa pale. Kwa hivyo kuyapunguza kwangu mimi si suluhu kwa sababu utapata ya kwamba for CBC it is competency based curriculum. We have to see all the competencies in a child. So if we are reducing on the subject, it means then it lacks the meaning of being a competent curriculum.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Or you have something to say on this as well. Yes, then I'll come to you.
Thank you very much, Trevor. I'm at a loss when teachers talk about fault the reducing of subjects and learning areas. You know too well that the workload of a teacher determines performance of the same teacher. When you have too much on your desk to do, definitely you will turn out not being a performer. And at the same time, I also want to talk about parents who think reducing subjects is of no use and they should remain as was proposed. What parents have complained about is CBC being expensive. When subjects are as they are, definitely sending children out to bring what shall be used in core competencies, the practical work, shall continue being a burden. So in a nutshell, the Presidential Working Party proposal to have subjects reduced as Kenya National Union of Teachers, 100% welcome.
Okay. Let's hear what you have to say. Yes, there's a lot of feedback on this. Yes, go ahead.
What I want to say is that on subject reduction, I concur with that. Because if you look at this curriculum, you will realize that in junior secondary, we have 14 subjects, learning areas. And if you go to primary schools, especially the public ones, there are only 2 teachers. So you find one teacher handling 7 subjects. For sure, your guess is as good as mine. There's no learning there. Because there is no way one teacher can handle serious new learning areas.
Okay.
And in reduction, it is, they have said that it's not just reducing, but merging some learning areas.
Jemima, is this too much of a burden for you because you're a CBC teacher?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. I don't think so. When you look at KPSEA grade 6, we have something that is known as integrated learning areas. And for me, from experience, it has worked so well. When you look at grade 7, right now we have the health education and other sciences. If the reduction of the learning areas comes looking into the content, like in health education, you have the mentor, whatever, can be taken to another learning area related to that. If it is reached through that, it is okay. We are looking into the content. integration of the content for the betterment of the children. So if it goes into that angle, it is good.
Now that you still have the microphone, sorry, Rashid, there's one question that came up from Kibra. The question from parents was, what is the rationale of asking all parents to bring things like chicken or eggs? Why don't you just bring one egg and show the students, even if there are 50 of them, that this is what an egg is and this is where it's coming from, instead of sending parents to all of them to bring 50 eggs if it's a class of 50 people?
Yeah, I listened to that and I was very much worried. Remember, CBC is center-learned. We are looking into the competencies, knowledge, skill, and attitude. As a teacher, are you competent enough to practice the competencies? Are you competent enough to practice?
All right, we'll switch your mic in just a bit. But
najua kuna mtihani hapa, manake walimu ambao watu wanawasaidia wakisema kwamba wana mzigo wenyewe wanasema kwamba
Yeah, are you competent enough to be a problem solver who can take that task as yours and come up with a problem? You have told the child to go and download and print. Take a picture when you are washing the utensil. That child, through creativity and imagination, can draw himself, color himself when they are washing utensils. And at the end of the day, the outcome has been achieved through the competency of the teacher. That is why we need teachers to be retooled, to be trained, to take it into the practice in class. I saw in the report
labda pengine tu nataka kupitisha kwa sauti, maana kuna jambo limezungumzwa pale la maana. Katibu anashangaa, anasema mabadiliko yamekuja kuwasaidia walimu, na anashangaa nyinyi walimu wenyewe hata mjui faida ya mabadiliko. Sasa hapa pana mtihani.
Asante.
Go ahead. It's on.
Asante sana. I've had the Secretary General, but I want to qualify myself. And I focused myself on junior school to senior school. I have no problem with the learning areas at primary and pre-primary. Those ones can be reduced based on the age. But I'm looking at the preparatory transitional stage, where this child must be exposed to a wide range of competences so that we are able to identify where is this child's niche, to be able to place him or her at the right senior school. So when we are talking about, the biggest challenge this country has is conflicting curriculum issues with issues of infrastructure and issues of manpower. The challenge we are having today of not having enough teachers should not lead us to make decisions that will affect our children in future. What we need to do, and which my Secretary General should do, is to ensure that the government is able to employ more teachers across in the all learning areas so that we are able to expose our children.
Shikilia hapo kaindi. Munafikiri maoni yako maana yake?
Asante. Nilikuwa tu nataka kuleta hoja kama ya mwenzangu Indimuli. Ndiyo, walimu walikuwa na pika kelele kwamba learning areas ilikuwa nyingi. Lakini kweli tukisema tunapunguza hizi learning areas wakati huu, tutakosea tena. Jinsi tulipokosea wakati ya mfumo wa 844. Pendekezo langu kufuatia na mwenzangu Indimuli wenye amesema ni kwamba pengine grade ya 7 wanafunzi hao wakuwa exposed kwa hizi 14 learning areas, then wafanye selection. Kwamba sasa wamekuwa assessed, wameenda through, na tumeona kweli huyu anatosha wapi na wapi.
Hapo sawa. Anthony, let me hear what you have to say. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I think my greatest concern here, because I've seen we have all the stakeholders in the education sector, I think the first thing which we can be able to address is that this CBC is quite unsustainable, simply because it is very expensive, even to parents. And the reason as to why we do not support it is because even as university students, myself representing Kenya University Students Organization, we were not consulted. And remember, university students, or even students in general, they are the key stakeholders of this process. They are the receiving end. So I feel like as we go forward, for it to be sustainable, we need to be incorporated in the decision-making process.
Okay. Na nataka mpitishie dada ambaye anashirika na masuala ya special needs hapo karibu. Pitisha tu hiyo microphone hapo tuweze kuuliza swali. Mbali na masuala ya kupunguzwa masomo, kuna hoja ile ya kwamba sasa hivi sisi tukisoma tulikuwa tunataka kwenda katika shule ya kitaifa. Mapendekezo yaliyopo ni kwamba tutakuwa tunaondoa zile hadhi ya kwamba national school ni nini na kwamba tunaziondoa kabisa. Kimaoni yako zitasaidia ama zitaleta ushindani kwa wanafunzi darasani?
To me, I think zitasaidia because we'll no longer have the competition that because remember one of the reasons why we actually going to CBC is reduce the competition that we have of even when you're looking for schools, the most important thing is what was the mean grade. So that is what we actually want to kill in this country. And we want to concentrate on the competencies of the child without the competition. But also talking about special needs, because I might not get the mic again. You see, in special needs is an individualized education program. In special needs, you don't talk about a curriculum because it's about an individual. And the most important thing is to look at a child and see what is this that they are good at. Okay. And now ensure that
Speaking
you maximize on that.
Needs, we have Sanoe back there. Sosion, that's behind you. Just give him the microphone so that we hear from him. He's the deputy in charge of programs, Kenya Institute of Special Education. What is missing when it comes to special education and CBC?
I think we could be saying what is good about it. Because for us in special needs education, we find quite a good curriculum. Essentially, CBC has come to allow learners with special needs and disabilities to especially get what we expect them to be getting. We have got now a different pathway called the stage-based pathway, where you allow learners to progress on their own pace. Yeah. Instead of pushing them that every year you have to move to the next grade. We are saying move when you have acquired the competencies that you need. Okay. If the requirement was for you to tie your shoes, your shoelace, if the requirement was for you to do buttoning your shirt, even if it takes 2 years, that is what is important for you. Rather than pushing them to do the academics, that will not give them anything in life. Okay. So for us, we are saying CBC has come to deliver what we want for learners with special needs and disabilities.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, it's fine.
Thank you very much, Trevor and Rashid. My question is, at whose cost are we going to continue buying things that parents basically cannot afford on a daily basis? At whose cost? Because it's the parent who is supposed to pay. And if the kid is in public school, practically you're not supposed to be spending a lot of money. So that's my first question. And my second comment is that let us be, open-minded to reducing subjects once we find that the interest of our kid is not in some of the subjects that they study all along, because that is practically wastage of time. Yeah. So let us be adapting the China way of educating the...
Okay. Professor Njenga, let me bring in Professor Njenga Munene, the VCZ Tech here. And now this is a whole different transition, because the transition is coming in 6 years' time. But are you, as universities, ready? Or should you also be retooled the way there's a proposal to retool teachers for another year?
Thank you very much, Obija. I want to talk about what we are doing at ZTech University. The Commission for University Education wrote to the universities for us to start preparing for CBC. And therefore what we are doing is that we are retooling all our staff to be ready for CBC. They have gone through several trainings and is going to continue for the next 2 to 3 years to ensure that by the time the CBC classes come in 2029, the first cohort when they are expected to be in a university, that we shall be ready. And that is happening. I don't know what is happening in the other universities, but that is what we are doing in ZTech University. And we are very ready for the cohort that is going to come. And therefore, I would only encourage that other universities also follow suit.
Na, kuna swali nimeweza kuzungumza na pengine Dr. Frida za kuchangia pia hili ni kwamba Ndimuli amesema na huyo amesema kwamba kama kuna shida ya walimu ni vizuri tuongeze walimu kuliko kupunguza masomo, kwa sababu unakupunguza masomo unakwepa shida, lakini uje angalia future ya mtoto darasani.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rashid. First of all, I want to concur with my colleague and the Vice Chancellor that as I speak, I'm representing JKUAT, which is Jomo Kenyatta University, under the TVET. Let me first of all say that TVETs are now adopting what we are calling the competence-based education training. That is what TVET is doing. And that shows the transition that we are going to have from the CBC to the TVETs and to the university. So these competencies that we are developing, we are looking at the talents that these kids are going to have. So for example, if you're at junior school and you choose a pre-technical course and you want to move to the TVET Institute, you'll be adopted, or we are going to take you for that course. So what I want to say is that the government has focused, especially on technical TVET institution, we are focusing more on competencies. I like the idea that he gave, can you tie your shoe or not? Yeah. So if you're training welders, can you hold that machine? Are you able to do it? Okay. If you're looking at a baker, somebody who wants to bake, can you be able to do the same? So we are looking at the competences that these kids are going to have, and this is going to transit all the way to the universities and even to the TVET institutions.
Galgalo, are we reducing the number of teachers here? Are we reducing the number of subjects because we don't have enough teachers, or is it because they are unnecessary? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. One, before we come to teachers, we look at competency. What is competency? Competency encompasses teachers, adequate teachers, infrastructure, that is classroom, internet connectivity, because there is a practical lesson concerning that. We need adequate learning and teaching material, which is required for competency. Since you lack all these facilities, how do you talk of competency? Somebody is saying the government should employ more teachers. It has been a perennial issue. It has been a problem. If I mention one county, which is within the central, I'm sorry to say that, they are overstaffed by 200 teachers. And yet you are saying employ more teachers to equip even more teachers of those counties. While in Asal, actually 2 teachers against 8 classes, or even 1 teacher against 8 classes. And how do you measure the competency with the lack of all these facilities? That is one. 2 is about assessment, quality of assessment. Somebody was mentioning that even in the university, people do assessment. Yes, they do assessment. It is correct. But with correct teachers teaching the relevant subject, and at the end of it all, there is what we call moderation, where everybody harmonizes all those. These professors will agree with me. They harmonize through moderation. Do we have that kind of moderation in the teaching fraternity? Yeah. Second, the other issue is about 844 system, where people said it was initially a practical lesson. Yeah. But later on, it was rationalized down, and the final result was as you have had. People are changing from one goalpost to another. And actually, we are not interpreting from the same script. Okay. Actually, there is a margin, a great margin. The other thing is, even in the curriculum development, if you go to KICD, I have gone to a classroom just to assess a book. I look at a book, and I can quote you, there is a book which is written by Longhorn Christian Religious Education, which is Lana's book, and it is grade 6, page 41. Page 41, and they can attest to that one, approved by KICD, and they said, download, watch the video clip. Okay. Download the video clip with your parents and the teachers, with the parents. And the literacy rate of those Asal counties is 8%. Literacy, 8%, while in the general term of Kenya, it is about 82. There is that disparity. Let me just finish my statement.
Very briefly,
because
yes.
you might not give me another time. So I have to exhaust because I'm really irritated by this. Then the other one is about swimming pool recommendation. What kind of practical lesson do you go in Asal when the water is scarcity, when there is pasture not there, and the children are following 40 kilometers to look for this water, and then you are recommending swimming pool, and the teacher himself doesn't know how to impart that knowledge to a learner. And at the same time, the school doesn't have a swimming pool. Leave alone even the swim. I, as a professor, or even my brother here, he doesn't have a swimming pool. But here, KICD are recommending the swimming pool. You know? And then they said, download, internet. When the school doesn't have internet, even the parents, kama wako na kabambe, what kind of internet? They don't have a smartphone. Okay. Then the last but not least, on education, National Education Board and ESCAC, which is Educational Standard and Quality Assurance Council, is not in operation. What kind of quality assessment do you do to that effect?
All right.
What is very important is the access.
Yes.
Is the access.
All right, Gal. Yeah. There's a lot to talk about in this, but let's cross over back to Jaya Lieta at the Mwananchi studio. We'll come back to this and have a conversation on CBC. Jaya?
Yeah, interesting conversation happening right there. But then also we still have the university students here in this studio. And they're also weighing in on this conversation, just getting to know their thoughts as much as they are university students. But some of them are on the fading out of this education system. What are your thoughts about the reforms that have been recommended by the working group? I'll start off with you.
Thank you so much, Jael. I think the recommendations that have been given by the by this task force, so many of them, I don't think the people are consulted. But then again, they can't all be wrong, because I feel some of them they are the right recommendations. Because when Professor Munavu and his team are recommending that we have one permanent council to be checking education all through, so that every president who comes doesn't again come in with another commission. For example, you remember that we had the Fatuma Chege commission, and the reports on all those commissions are piling up dust in probably in some shelf somewhere. So it's important that we have that one permanent council. Secondly, probably as I wind up, Jael, I would say that instead of introducing a mandatory kind of forced NYS training, I would feel that, because normally that happens in countries that are normally at war. So in our country, we are very peaceful, unless probably we want to go up against Somalia and other.
No, you're talking about the community service now.
Yes. I feel that instead of probably getting us into that, we could substitute it with entrepreneurship program, because where we are going, we need more of people who can actually go out there, and instead of probably getting a job, waiting for the government to provide for them employment, then they can start something of their own. So I feel that entrepreneurship program would be way better than us going the NYS.
The NYS way.
Yeah.
And on that one, looking at the preparation, CBC preparing students for the next phase, and you're at the universities, do you think the students at the CBC level are well prepared for higher learning, for the institutions of higher learning?
Thank you so much, Jay. For me, I would say that CBC program would make a lot of sense if it is well implemented, because the questions and our worry is do we have enough teachers who are trained? Do we have enough resources? Because you find you have told a student or a pupil to go and take a picture, whereas parents back at home, they don't have a smartphone, or maybe they require something that you have told them to research on, they require internet. And I would like to say this, that the only vaccine to poverty in this world is education. Through education, that's when we will eradicate poverty. But we cannot make education contradicted, and we are expecting to move on. So when we contradict the whole system of education, which is holding the future of this country, the future is contradicted. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And finally, from you, Trady, just getting ready for the job market, CBC, all the trainings and all the models that have been put in place. Are our children getting ready for the job market? Are you ready for the job market?
Practically, CBC is not actually going to culminate into what the professionals are actually talking about. Because when you look at preparedness, they have talked about facilities, they have talked about the personnel that are going to drive this particular course. I don't really see the youth getting ready for the market, yeah, the job market. And of course, for a punchline, you know, the root cause for all these problems, it still comes back to the comrades, the high fees. And I would like to urge that just as we had issued our statement, that our parents or the parents that are bringing their children to universities for first year might be able to raise those amounts in as much as they are huge for first year. But these parents will not be able to sustain the same through raising funds through families, through relatives and circles. And so, because the majority of the students at the university are the youth, you have to remember that you are youthful and the youth are very energetic, very radical, and very persuasive. We must step in and fight for our future. We must step in and fight for the coming generation. We are now getting divided that, you know, for the continuing students, this is not going to affect you. It is going to affect those who are coming behind you so that you remain silent. That is wrong. Right now, accommodation fees, tuition fees have been multiplied, yeah, to the continuing students in different universities. So if you think that it is not affecting you, know that it is affecting you, and we have to come out.
Thank you, Teddy. Thank you, all the university student leaders that are here in the studio with us. And as they say, it's all about taking it to the very end, not starting up something and then leaving it hanging at somewhere in between. So thank you very much for your thoughts and for speaking for the university or higher students population in the country. So back to the government studio, Yvonne and Lincoln.
Na shukran sana kwa mazungumzo hayo, na bila shaka kuna wataalam katika studio yetu hii ambao tajibu maswali ambayo yameulizwa pale, na tuna Professor Charles Ongondo ambaye anasimamia KICD ambayo ndio yasimamia masuala ya mtaala wa elimu, na pia tuna Dr. Davis Njagere ambaye anasimamia baraza la mitihani hapa nchini NEC, atajibu maswali kuhusiana na masuala ya kuwatahini wanafunzi wetu, na pia tunaye Dr. Ruben Ntamburi ambaye anasimamia masuala ya ubora wa elimu katika tume ya kuajiri walimu nchini TSC, na amerejea pia studioni Dr. Elias Abdi. Professor Charles Ongondo kutoka KICD, labda tuanze pale katika swala la kupunguza idadi ya masomo. Ni msingi upi ulitumika pale? Ni baadhi ya masuala yapi ambayo mliangalia ndipo mkasema tutapunguza masomo haya kutoka 14 hadi 9? Haya 6 ambayo yanaondolewa, mlitumia criteria gani kuyaondoa?
Asante sana Lincoln. Utaniruhusu ni kujibu kwa lugha ya
Kiswahili,
Kiingereza. Hilo ndio lugha nilisomea nikalipia.
Lugha unaizungumza iko sawa sana, inaeleweka vizuri sana.
Utaendelea
wazazi wakuelewe vizuri.
KICD was represented in the Presidential Working Party for Education Reforms. And therefore, we were part of the conversation from the beginning. We went round with the party and listened to stakeholders in different parts of the country. And one of the things that emerged, which we could not close our ears to, was that because of the too many learning areas, the parents were feeling that CBC was expensive. And so one of the reasons of addressing the complaint or the perception of the cost of living was to rationalize the learning areas. Another issue that arose, as I heard Professor Odote mention earlier, was that learners were beginning to say, and some teachers, that there was an overload. They were overloaded and therefore needed a little more time to rest, or a few more breaks. So how did we arrive at the numbers? If you look at the report of the Presidential Working Party, it says KICD should rationalize the learning areas. It proceeds to say should look at the scope and the sequence and the curriculum designs. So what we are doing, just to assure the country, is not scrapping, is not killing learning areas, as some people have said. We are rationalizing. One of the ways we are doing this is looking at some learning areas which have related strands and sub-strands, and saying this could be accommodated within one learning area. And I'll give you some examples. You look at a learning area at junior school, like health education, and then you say there's a lot of overlap between some of the issues that we are dealing with in health education that could be accommodated within the broader area of science. And that doesn't mean there was a mistake in coming up with health education, because when you are coming up with a learning area, you think about identity, you are thinking about prominence, you are thinking about consistency with what the rest of the world is doing. I'll give you a second example and then we leave there. The second example would be an area like life skills, where when you now look at it a bit more keenly, then you realize that some of the areas could be accommodated within what we call social studies. And that goes on for the lower primary, upper primary and junior school.
Kidogo pale ndipo Kahindi Muli anaingilia.
Yes.
Na ameuliza swali kwamba mnapopunguza haya masomo katika levels ambazo umezizungumzia pale, unamwachia mwanafunzi na nafasi chache sana za kuweza kufanya uamuzi kama angependa kwenda katika masuala ya sayansi, sanaa, social science na kadhalika. Hivi ingekuwa ni afadhali kulingana na Kahindi Muli tuwe na masomo mengi zaidi katika ngazi hii, ndipo iwe rahisi kwa mwanafunzi kuchagua?
Wacha niseme hatupunguzi. Ile tunafanya ni kuchukua strand kutoka kwa somo lingine na kuweka kwa somo lingine, making sure that the critical competencies that the learners are supposed to have are not lost, making sure that we have still given the learners adequate exposure to be able to choose the specific pathways they want to go to. Let me give you a small example. Learning areas mutate. So if you look at pre-primary level, we have only 5. It is from those 5 that they mutate to what has been suggested now to be 8. From those 8, they go to 9. So what we are calling science, for example, in junior school, if you go to senior school, we shall get biology out of it. We shall get chemistry out of it. We shall get physics out of it. So it means that at the junior school, we must make sure that we have put all those elements so that even as the learner moves to senior school and now meets biology, they are not completely surprised. Okay. They have experienced some parts of it at that level. So that care has been taken to ensure that the competencies, the values, and even the learner-centered pedagogies that CBC anticipates have been taken care of.
All right, let's talk about the retooling of teachers, for a moment. Bwana Ruben, perhaps you could speak to the issue of this. Do we have enough trained teachers for CBC? And we understand there's retooling going on. Could you talk to us about just what sort of skills are required of the teachers?
Thank you so much, Madam Yvonne. I want to say that when we started the competency-based teacher training, from 2018, we have been doing training of teachers on a continuous basis. I want to say that training of teachers is not a one-off aspect, as it has been said. It is continuous. We do either a 5 days training, and our curriculum support officers who are at the zonal level visit the schools within the zone to continue offering more professional support to the teachers so that they can be able to teach and be able to even and demonstrate what is required to the learners. So this is an exercise that is ongoing. It is not a one-off exercise. Number two, the teachers are already trained to teach. Competence-based curriculum is basically a methodology on learner-centered approach. And teachers, from their pre-service training, they went through that. So what we are doing now is retooling them and telling them, yes, the new curriculum designs that have been developed by KICD, then they are supposed to be handled this way. We are talking about core competencies. How do the teachers develop the core competencies? So we are looking at the new method of teaching, or what we are calling the pedagogical content knowledge. How a teacher impacts that to the learners. Those are the kind of issues that are coming on board. And also the new way of assessing. Because now we have different aspects of assessments that have come on board. So the teachers are being retooled in those areas so that they can be able to deliver as expected. Finally, there is the question of values, the question of the community service learning, the question of the pertinent and the contemporary issues that are affecting the society. These are new aspects that have come in the curriculum, and the teachers are being retooled in order to be able to deliver.
All right.
And as I've indicated, it is a continuous process.
All right. And you mentioned, assessments, and we heard from Dr. Collins Orote, who was in the Presidential Working Party, and he did mention that, summative examinations, it is a written exam. And so, Mr. Njagere, I'd like to then talk about this idea of summative examinations. They still form a huge part of the grading system under CBC, and I thought one of the reasons of going into CBC was that it would be less focused on examinations such as these. Perhaps you could speak to us about this, because we had this over-reliance on examination as a way of gauging understanding and competence, but we still see elements of that in CBC as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Yvonne. From the outset, and using global standards in assessment, there is no system in the world that does pure formative assessment. There is always an aspect of summative assessment. Now, what has happened is that we have created a very healthy balance between the formative and the summative assessment. So if you are to take formative assessment to be assessment for learning, so that while the learner is still within the system or within the cycle, if it's primary or junior or senior, there is an assessment that is helping inform how the learner is progressing and feeding back to the learner and helping them to improve on the areas where they need to improve. If you look at KIPSEA, for example, the balance between the summative and the formative, there is more of formative, which is 60%, and summative is 40%. But as you move towards grade 12, which is going to be more for certification, then the marks for summative goes a little higher, and the marks for formative goes lower to 30. So we are not saying that we will have pure summative. There will be a balance between the summative and the formative.
Thank you for that. Maybe, just to get a summary or, a clear understanding of this, Dr. Abdi, who will be in charge of the overall implementation of this report?
Thank you for that. I wanted just to clarify a few things before I respond to that. The issues raised from the stakeholders, especially, we heard that parents were not involved. I just want to confirm that parents were part of the Presidential Working Party. I know we had a parent, for example, from Donholm Primary, another from Nairobi Primary, other primary schools, secondary schools. So in terms of consultation and everything to do with stakeholder participation, I think that was done very well. But again, the issue of infrastructure has also been raised and support to schools. All I just want to say is that in the last financial year, the infrastructure allocation for primary education was around 120 million. But this year, it has been increased by 6 times, 740 million. For for secondary education, the infrastructure allocation to our schools has been 1.6 billion the last financial year. This year, the allocation is 3.2 billion. And so there's a lot of investment in this area. And if you look at, for example, circulars that we have just released in form of what the parents were saying, especially for the junior secondary education, we even have provisions in the capitation for schools to buy laboratory materials, materials for practicals under CPC, assessment, stationaries, capacity building even for teachers is catered for within the government financing. So I just want people to be aware of that. And in terms of capitation, junior secondary school, the whole, we are allocating 15,042 shillings per child. And so that is really very critical. About this report and the way forward, I think during the launch, His Excellency has already made directives. The Cabinet Secretary, Minister of Education, will be in charge. But we'll get support, of course, from the Attorney General and the rest of the government, machineries. And so the Cabinet Secretary, in the next coming days, definitely you'll be hearing of a lot of pronouncements. Because the report was launched on the 1st of August, and this is the 9th of August. And so there's a team working behind the scenes, technical officers putting things together, and so the report will be implemented as directed.
Kuna kitu Bwana Elias wengi wamekipata kwa mara ya kwanza kabisa, hasa wale ambao ni wazazi wa kileo, community service learning. Tuzungumzia nini hasa?
Thank you very much. I know in Kenya, when we talk of community service learning, the first thing that comes into our mind is NYS.
NYS, yes.
But community service learning is not NYS. At the Ministry of Education, we have good experience, and there are a number of even our schools that are even implementing community service learning. At the ministry, in the year 2014 to 2016, we have been running a program called, G United, Greatness United, where we were getting, university graduates, and we posted them to around 22 counties, 1,600 of them, in 800 primary schools, and they were assisting schools in foundational learning, early literacy and numeracy. And these graduates, one condition was that they will not work in their home counties. We post them to other counties. And then as they were assisting the schools, they were even living with families from those communities. So community service learning is a civic duty where, for example, the graduates, join families, they give back to communities. They, for example, one good example is for example, Estrehe Boys. Estrehe Boys, for some time, has been implementing community service learning. Students will pick where they want to go to, if it's a hospital, for example, or they want to work in a government facility.
So sorry, because I just want to get understanding. This will be done by the schools, because there's the one for 3 months, and then there's the 9-month community service. So where are they domiciled? Who is running these community service programs? Does that happen within the schools they're in, or?
In terms of implementation, what the report says is we implement community service learning 9 months after tertiary education, and then 3 months after senior. So in terms of the details and how exactly it will be implemented, that is what now the implementation team will take up. But I just want to assure the country that community service learning is not NYS. It is not, you have to return back to community, do something within the community, work in maybe, places where your effort is required in terms of maybe schools, government offices. You can go there as a student, maybe assist in a government facility, in hospital, in an orphanage, and give back to society. You participate in tree planting, and then you are certified and you are given a certificate. The case of the school I was just referring to, for example, the students go and participate in community service learning, and where they have been working, they're given a report. And the school, at times even in the assembly, they read that report about this child and what the child has been doing. So this is what we are talking about in terms of community service learning.
Na kabla tujamaliza, Bwana Ruben, swala hili la quality assurance limehamishwa sasa Wizara ya Elimu. Mlikuwa mlishughulika katika TSC. Waunga mkono wazo hilo?
Those are the recommendations of
the working party.
Yes.
Kwamba mambo ya ubora wa elimu.
And as Arias has indicated, the issue of how the implementation will be done is an issue of a what we are calling a consultative aspect. So there are quite a number of consultations that are being done so that we align the things as they are required to make sure the education system runs smoothly.
Okay.
Yes.
Nafikiri tutamatishie pale kwa sababu ya muda, lakini tuseme asante sana kwa kupata muda wenu na kuweza kujibu maswali ambayo yameibuka kutoka kwa washirikadau tofauti, na bila shaka ni mjadala mkuu sana huu wa elimu ya msingi na pia elimu ya juu ile ambayo tumezungumzia hapo awali. Shukran kwa wakati wenu.
And now over to you, Sam Gituku and Mashirima Kapombe.
Naam, shukran Yvonne kutoka studio hiyo. Sasa tunataka kuwapatia pia nafasi wataalamu wetu waweze kutupatia kauli zao za mwisho. Na nitaanza na wewe Daktari Kilemi Mwiria. Unaweza kutueleza kuhusiana na hili swala la kugharamia elimu, kwamba kila miaka inavisonga, kuna ile bajeti ambayo imesomwa mwaka huu, takriban shilingi bilioni 628.6 zikiwa zimetengewa elimu. Lakini kadri miaka inavisonga, hizi fedha ama hii gharama ya elimu inazidi kuongezeka. Serikali inapaswa kufanya nini kuhakikisha kwamba kwanza wanapata hizi fedha ambazo wanaziratibu kwenye bajeti, kisha la pili hizi pesa zinatumika ipasavyo?
No, yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. This issue about money, education is about money. A lot of people have said that. And it's what you put in the system. And one issue we have, of course, is the use of the resources that they go to those institutions. Uses in terms of what is bought, books and so on, but also the time. Our teachers there all the time. So that's an issue, of inefficiency. But let me just, because now we are living in hustler times, let me speak for the hustler child and the educational disadvantage of the hustler kid. The hustler kid will not matter whether they're in CBC, 844, or the system I went through. They can fit in any system, they are survivors. But it's unfair, even to talk about funding university education when very few of them can actually make it. It is very unfair to say that to get into university, a child from a day school in Garissa requires a C+, like a child from Mango High School. It's very unfair to say that to qualify for medicine, a child from a day school in West Pokot needs the same cluster points, the same grade as a kid from, Kagumo High School. This is a monumental injustice, completely. So, what am I suggesting? We must differentiate the qualifications, the grades that we require. If you are from a day school, someplace in Mandera, a C+ is good enough for you to enter university. But it should be a B or higher for one from Kenya High School. If you are from a school in Mandera, someplace, a day school, if you've got a B, you should be able to do medicine compared to a student who has an A from another school, and so on and so on. It also should translate into what is available in terms of scholarships. We have a lot of scholarships from friendly governments. Why should we allow children, non-hustlers, who can afford to pay for that education overseas, to take those scholarships? I would recommend that all those scholarships should go to day school kids. When we do this, day schools will also be popular. Parents will realize, oh, so my child can go to a day school in Tigania West and make it to university to do medicine. And this affirmative action should extend to employment. Because while a kid from an hustler family is more likely to be able not only to buy a university degree through the degree program, they will also be able to buy a job on graduation. A hustler kid will not have the money to do that. It's extremely important. Since we live in hustler times, we begin to think how we can get them to be competitive and to be able to take advantage of opportunities, both in education and on graduation.
All right, and Dr. Manyasa, because of this idea, you called it an aspiration the other time that we were here, that to make the secondary schools or the senior schools to be STEM-based. Do you have that capacity? Because once a student has gone to a STEM school, 60% of them, you'd also imagine that they should get to a university to study a science-based course. Do you have the capacity for that higher education, but also to absorb them in an economy that you find a lot of people are not necessarily in the science areas?
Thank you, Sam. I think that it is a good aspiration to have to create more scientists in the country and therefore power our industrialization. But it's also important for us to be realistic in the timing of the transition and remind ourselves that the children we are talking about being 60% in STEM are currently in some of these schools we've seen that don't even have a classroom, leave alone a laboratory, from where we can start to nurture their potential to be in the STEM stream. That is one. Two, it's important to understand that if you look at our institutions of learning, both schools and universities, they are currently mostly populated by teachers and lecturers who are not in STEM. And the transition process of therefore creating the manpower to support 60% of our learners in STEM will take time. And for me, it is also important to look at the cost implication of doing that, because if we are going to create labs in the schools where there aren't, we need time, we need resources to be able to invest. So that we are careful not to create STEM in name, where people have gone through a physics course. I have my own cousin who trained in motor vehicle mechanics in a small polytechnic that did not have a car. To this day, he can't even drive. He's a mechanic. He did a trade test and passed, but he cannot start a car. We don't want to do that because that will not add value to our society. So for me, there's a question that was asked in the other studio about who is going to be responsible for implementation of this report. And it's a question that we've had about who is going to be responsible for implementation of CBC. Because we can't have it be with the CS. The CS is not supposed to be a technical person involved in the nuts and bolts. The PSCs are 3 of them, so everyone has a different segment. We need an entity that will do consistent and constant troubleshooting of all the challenges that will emerge alongside the journey of implementing this curriculum until the first graduate leaves university. Because we are on a learning journey, everyone is learning, everyone is encountering new challenges. We need a structure that will oversee the implementation to the end of this process.
Naam. Bila shaka, Janet, kuna hili swala la kuwafundisha walimu kwa ripoti hii wanaita retooling ambayo inafanyika. Lakini swali ni je, ni kipi ambacho kinafanyika zaidi kwa wale walimu ambao watahitajika katika senior school pamoja na wale ambao watawashughulikia baada ya miaka 6, wale watoto ambao watakuwa wanaingia katika vyuo vikuu?
Thank you so much. And I think the question of retooling, nowadays it's about changing names. We are no longer saying about building capacities of people. Now we are saying we are retooling. And I think the question of retooling teachers has been spoken a lot about. And I remember especially when CBC was receiving a lot of beating, the issue was that teachers have not been involved, teachers have not been retooled. But then when the Presidential Working Party came on board, I saw data going around, and it was indicating that so many teachers had actually been reached out to, and so many teachers had been inducted about CBC. I even saw an admission from the teacher trainers that part of the training for you to become a teacher, you're trained on a cross-section of so many issues. So essentially, it is not like a teacher is not going to be prepared by the time they're getting out of college to implement CBC. And in that regard, I want to speak to the silent TOR that the Presidential Working Party, I know they were working on. And I think it is the TOR of wanting to make this regime look like there's a game changer or there are things that are happening differently. And I want to say that you really cannot do that with education and health. They are really systemic in nature. And so the excitement of wanting to look good or excitement of wanting to look like we are making things happen is not going to take anybody anywhere. And case in point is like what we are seeing about the reforms in higher education. I call them reforms because we are not addressing the problem. We are told the problem is because the universities were almost dying. Why were universities dying? If those issues as to why the universities were dying have not been addressed, and the issues are in discipline, in the manner in which people spent money. You had universities buying buildings every corner of the world, and then they could not attract more learners. If those issues are not addressed, then definitely this is not going to go anywhere. And then we have not even addressed the issue. The issue is government's lack of commitment to funding higher education. Now, what have we done? We have now removed the burden from the government, and we have thrown the burden at the parents. What will that do? In the short run, it looks like the government is a genius, that like it has won. But 2-3 years down the line, you will have so many children who will be dropping out of school. You will have parents. You cannot say that because universities have got loans, now you use parents that have got loans and that are paying taxes to bail out universities. Right. So in short, what we are saying is the approach in which we give things, education and health and a sector like agriculture, they are so systemic. Let government settle down and let us see real investment. Why I'm at a loss is because today, even when the Presidential Working Party was going around, everybody knew that there were finance implications. But show me the budget of today. Show me where the only thing that we have is a promise that we shall increase capitation. When shall we do that? It cannot happen this year, because we do not have even talk of a supplementary budget. We're talking about next year. In essence, what we're saying is that this particular government, for 2 good years, it is not going to do anything about the improvement that we are seeing here. So in short, we're saying, can we be practical, and then can we be more systemic, and let's just settle down. You are in government now, you are the ones in charge, settle down and do the job.
Yeah. All right, and Dr. Mugo, as we wind up, so much, very big on promise. The teacher shortage is put at 111,000. The budget is there. Of course, they're saying that it will cost 74 billion shillings extra to employ more teachers. Do you think we have established what the problem is, and have we come up with a proper solution to all these challenges in the education sector?
Actually, what masks that teacher shortage is that the TVET trainers that we are lacking are not counted. And so if we look at it holistically on both teachers and at all levels, and we exclude early childhood development also, and so the estimations we have really are far below bar. And unless if we address all these things holistically, as Janet says, it's very easy to get excited and excite people. We have a new system. But actually, it is a system that continues to propagate the same challenges we were trying to resolve. The challenge of not learning, too much schooling without learning. A lot of our conversation for the last 4 hours has been around inputs. But what will matter at last is the graduate we produce. Do they have the competencies that we are looking for? So even our reporting, we want to hear less of how much money we are putting in, how many classrooms we are constructing. We want to hear the child in grade 3, that in grade 7 and so on, have these kind of competencies, and this is what they are lacking. Okay. The aspect of teachers is extremely critical. But overall, the Presidential Working Committee has focused very well, I think, on education as an island. And my problem is that so many problems that inhibit success of the education sector are not domiciled in the sector itself. Okay. Aspects of food, why should education be dealing with school feeding when we have a whole ministry? Why should we be battling with infrastructure? A head teacher is turned into a contractor, an engineer. They are trained, they should be in class leading instruction. What is the Ministry of Public Works doing? And so I think as long as, we have heard about water, why should schools be concerned about power and water when we have ministries? Okay. So I think this and the whole aspect of value, expecting that now we have value-based education, we're excited. Children will learn values in school when out here, In Parliament, in State House, we are not practicing those values. We are cheating ourselves, and we are expecting what education cannot produce.
And Professor Odote, as we wind up, is this the last report about matters education? And how to make sure that this is the last one?
Thank you. Please allow me to speak about two other things very quickly. The first is, I think Janet has spoken about a silent TOR. And she says she knows we are working on a silent TOR. At least I know she was not a member of the working party. So I can speak on behalf of my other 42 colleagues. Our responsibility was not to make government look bad, neither was it to make it look good. Our responsibility was to answer the TORs that were given, and none of the ones she spoken about was the TORs given to us. That's number one. The second one is the question about retooling. I think we speak about retooling for primary and secondary schools, but just as this show was going on, colleagues at the Faculty of Law where I teach were busy asking, so how will we teach CBC kids when they arrive at the university? Making the point that that retooling is even necessary for lecturers too. So I think that's the spirit we need to look at it. My last one, is this going to be the last report? If you look at the report, we have a table that shows how many reports we have had over the years. Very, very many reports. And if you look at some of the things we have recommended, you see some of them are a carryover from the previous reports. I think I was looking, for example, at a report where Janet sat, the one of Fatuma Chege. You will see some of the things that were there. I was looking at the one for Kilemi. You'll see some of the things that were there. I think the challenge for us moving forward as a country is not whether there will be another report or not, but to what extent we are faithful as a country in terms of implementing the recommendations that have been given. And that's a task that I think all of us leaving this studio, I think the Working Party has finished its work. It is now the responsibility of the different stakeholders and all of us Kenyans to ensure that the good things in this report are implemented so that 5 years down the road, we don't come back. The place I agree with Janet is I think the future of our kids is too important to play politics with. I think we all must rally together to be able to ensure we implement the recommendations in a manner that benefits this country.
Kibarua hapa katika utekelezwaji.
And of course, we thank you so much for your time, but let's hear from Trevor and Rashid in their stakeholders studio as we get the final remarks.
Na bila shaka shukran sana Samgi, tuko na Mashirima, nafikiri ni dakika za lala salama, lakini tutajaribu kupata maoni ya wadau hapa ndani ili tuhakikishe tumeweza kufanikisha mjadala huu. Labda nije na ndugu yangu Daktari Paul Wanjoi ambaye pia vileweza kuchangia, ambaye anawakilisha UASU. Umeyasikia mengi ameweza kuzungumzwa. Kimaoni yako, CBC ifanywe nini ndio iwe bora zaidi?
Asante sana. Nasema kwamba kwanza nawashukuru nyote kwa sababu ya kutuleta pamoja hivi. Na tuseme kama ingelitendeka hivi hata kabla ya CBC kuanzishwa tungekuwa bali sana. Lakini kwa maoni ambayo yametolewa na watu wengi, lile ambalo ningelitaka kushagia ni msasi kutoka Kibra alielia kwamba walimu wa CBC wanazidi kunona na kuitisha vitu ambavyo havifai. Niseme ya kwamba mambo haya yote yatendeka kwa sababu wazazi na tuseme nchi yote haijafahamishwa vema kuhusu CBC, kwa sababu shule ambayo imeidhinishwa kuendeleza mambo ya masomo haipaswi kuwa na walimu ambao wanafanya yale mambo. Tukose kupaka CBC matope, na kama watu hawaelewi, tafadhali ni vema waijue. Tena katika ile report tuseme kuna jambo moja tu ambalo ningeligusia kuhusu watoto ambao wanasomea katika shule zile zinapatikana katika slums. Haikugusia zaidi kuhusu vile wale watoto ambao wako katika shule za ABET watasaidika, kwa sababu tukisema mambo ya equity na inclusivity, hiyo haijatajwa vyema. Na kwa hivyo, kwa sababu tumeambiwa kuna process ambayo itafuatiliwa ili yale mambo yote yaweze kutekelezwa, ningeliomba wote ambao wanatusikiza, na ninafurahi kwa sababu sote tuko hapa, tuhakikishe ya kwamba watoto ambao wako katika the low income estates and their sons like the professor here, wote wameshughulikiwa. Asante sana.
Let's bring in Solomon Munene from the Kenya Private Schools Association. And Professor Odote was speaking just a few moments ago, saying his own lecturers, colleagues are asking him whether they'll be retooled to take in the CBC learners. What are you doing as the Private Schools Association, and will that 1 year retooling be enough for the teachers?
Thank you very much for that question of retooling. Let me first and foremost say that as Kenya Private Schools Association, we play a very critical role to complement the government effort to provide education to our Kenyan children. And for that matter, we believe that at this moment now, what you're talking about, it is implementation of the CBC and the challenges that we are maybe experiencing in that implementation. And we have talked about teachers retooling, shortage of teachers. We need to have more teachers, employ more teachers. If you have to implement the CBC well, we are talking about infrastructure. The government is saying is increasing more budgetary allocation on infrastructure. We need more learning equipment because CBC, if you are to be able to nurture the potential in all learners, then we have to expose them in a lot of learning activities, which requires those learning equipment. And for that matter, as I finish, I would say, there are many solutions, but I would suggest one, which is collaboration. Okay. We can collaborate very well, so that we can have even the TVET institutions and other producing those materials for CBC. We can also have the government having the tax incentives, like duty-free, to import some of this equipment. And lastly, as I finish, as private schools, we look back at one of the reports by Professor Diabo about education in 2012, where they recommended that there be establishment of a revolving fund in the spirit of public-private partnership. And that one would help us in a very...
Kwa muda manake kuna wengi takawapate maoni, labda pengine tukienda kwa hapo kwenye kwamba mapendekezo mengine katika mageuzi yao ni kwamba tutakuwa tukichapisha mitihani yetu hapa. Mtaiamini, mtakuwa na wasiwasi nayo.
Thank you so much. My name is Nancy. Thank you so much, Rashida and Trevor. Yes, we will accept that because when you look at SIDAC TVET, being one of the private TVET institutions we have in this country, I feel SIDAC TVET is the best. And why do I say this? This is because the students are going to get the skills. The students are able to be competent on it. But also, I would like to urge the government not to forget the private TVET institutions in our country, because also young people, the youth who are also hustlers are joining this institution, and they would also feel nice if they get funds so that they can be in a position to continue getting these skills. I'd like to hear from Mr. James Ogweno, the Chief Principal, St. Bakita, on what the recommendations are on this retooling of the teachers. Will it suffice?
Thank you very much, Trevor. And actually, you've stolen what I wanted to say. My approach to this is very different, and one we need to be very positive with this. On the aspect of retooling of teachers, the government has to be very elaborate with their training. Three things that are important: elaborate training, support, and provision of resources. There's a bit of the migration or the removing the quality assurance from Teacher Service Commission to the Ministry of Education Department. It's not just about the physical movement. Can they be moved and be empowered? And the curriculum support officers be empowered to support the teachers in the implementation of the competency-based curriculum. I want to strongly believe if the teachers seated here and the teachers teaching Kenyan children are empowered to teach the learners, CBC is a very beautiful curriculum.
Nipitishie kwa mwisho pekao dada mwenye aweza kutoa maoni yake.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Yeah, I just want to concur with the speaker who's just spoken. The CBC curriculum is a very beautiful curriculum, but the main implementer, the person who goes directly to the child, is the teacher, and that teacher should be properly trained. And the training does not just include theory or PowerPoint presentation. It has to be practical, it has to be ongoing. There has to be a lot of practical training ongoing, and that's how we will get rid of these misconceptions, such that every child has to bring a chicken. Yeah. That's not CBC, that's a misconception of CBC, or even being asked to bring that chicken or a bamboo stick the night before. That's not CBC, because CBC trains people to be organized, to have values. If you want to ask children for something, you must ask them on time, weeks before, so that they know what they are doing.
So is it the teachers who have misunderstood the system?
Yes, and it is not their fault. I wouldn't say it's their fault. They did not go through a CBC system. Most of these teachers went through 844. Many of them did not touch a paintbrush, did not do any practical sessions. So they just interpret what is in the book.
Okay.
Yeah, but with proper training, they will know how to problem solve, as Jemima said. You know, if you don't have enough, you can improvise. That is problem solving, and that is the part of the CBC.
Or you will 1 year suffice for retooling as you pass the microphone to Sosion?
Well, before I talk about the 1 year, I want to look at one important factor here about teachers in this republic. Comparatively with teachers elsewhere, talk of Bahamas, Malaysia, and so on, even Japan, the Presidential Working Party has talked about a lot of changes. Here, we are talking about retooling, supporting teachers. We are not even talking about motivating the same teachers.
Okay.
A demotivated teacher cannot offer quality education. This is what the Presidential Party, Working Party, missed all along. So I want to say here, even as we are actually supporting all that is the Presidential Working Party, special consideration should be given to motivating the same teachers.
Okay.
Bila shaka najua kwamba maoni ni mengi mtazamaji, lakini naona mwelekezi naye pia anatuambia kwamba muda unasonga. Hata sijui hapa tutafanyaje, maana yake kwamba lazima tufanikishe.
Sasa sio naona kidogo anatusukuma tupe sijui dakika moja.
Yeah, thank you.
1 minute.
I will summarize. Yes. The report is one of the best. And among all the reports that have been generated in this country, this one should be implemented. It's going to speak to many issues. Okay. Many challenges have been outlined about the new curriculum. The new curriculum, first of all, it never went through public participation. The previous government did not allow proper and deep consultations. Okay. That is why you see the issues of assignments where you are telling parents to bring chicken and children to swim. Okay. That model was modern for rich homes, where there are swimming pools and food and all such. And I think elimination of these unnecessary aspects in this curriculum is quite welcome in the report. The other bit is the structure of getting the comprehensive school system of lumping the pre-primary to grade 9. That brings education closer to the households and make it even a little bit more cheaper. And of course, a lot of work now remains with KICD.
We have to head to Jeff and Lulu now. Thank you so much for making time and speaking to us as stakeholders right here on The Big Conversation. Jeff?
Rashid, thank you so much. It's been an incredible 3 hours of a big conversation. That's why it's called The Big Conversation.
The Big Conversation, mjadala mkuu. Ama kwa hakika mtazamaji, hisia mseto zimeweza kutolewa kutoka kwa wadau mbalimbali kuhusiana na mapendekezo ya jopo kazi la Profesa Munavu.
Absolutely. And you know what? We have to continue this conversation, Lulu, because it's not about us anymore. It's about our children and their children after that.
From here, Jeff, wajua tunasemaje? Tunasema kwamba tumempeleka mtazamaji saluni. Kusuka au kunyoa ni hiari yake.
Aha.
It's up to you.
Na akiwa na miadi kama mimi.
Na mtazamaji, shukrani sana kwa niaba ya wote walioweza kufanikisha matangazo haya moja kwa moja. Kama unavyoona katika kiwambo chako cha runinga, ni kwamba tulikuwa wengi
sana. And for the experts, the stakeholders, the government, the town hall, and the folks in Kibra as well. And of course the comrades over there across the room from us. Everyone, thank you so much for being a part of The Big Conversation.
Kutoka kwetu tunasema shukrani sana kwa muda wako. Uwe na usiku mwanana. Kwaheri.
Good night.